This is the Module 9 introduction video. So in this module, we're going to continue taking a look at how to summarize variables. So if you'll remember, in Module 6, we first looked at how to numerically as well as graphically summarize categorical variables. And then we spent some time graphically summarizing quantitative variables. And then last week, we looked at how to numerically summarize quantitative variables by themselves, as well as how to compare that quantitative variable to a categorical variable and make comparisons using numeric summaries. So up to this point, we have primarily been looking at what we call univariate summaries. And so that's summarizing a variable by itself, with the exception of when we looked at summarizing the quantitative variable for different levels of a categorical variable. Now for your EPI reports and in practice, most of the time you won't be summarizing a single variable, but instead you'll want to look at summaries of variables compared to one another. And that's what we're going to do this week. And so you might ask, well, if that is so important, why did we spend so much time doing univariate analysis? And the reason for that is before you ever compare variables to themselves, it's very important to look at variables univariately first to understand their properties. And then once you understand what's going on univariately, it's easy to then extend to start to talk about what's happening what we call multi or bivariately. The other reason the univariate summaries are so important is it gives you time to get familiar with your codebook and what variables are available. And so by spending 3 weeks looking at univariate analysis, you've had the opportunity to really start going through the codebook and seeing what was available. You've also had the opportunity to start to notice that a lot of times we can't use the variables in their raw forms as they're presented. This is especially true with the quantitative variables, because you saw in the codebook often zeros were coded as an 88, so you would have to transform them. You'd also have to remove don't knows and refuses from many of the quantitative variables. Some of the quantitative variables needed to be transformed, so hopefully if you used BMI as one of your variables, you'll notice that the way that the values are coded are in the thousands. Well, BMI isn't actually recorded in the thousands, and so those numbers look pretty funny, but if you looked in the codebook, you would see, oh, there's 2 implied decimal places there. So a BMI of 2000 really means a BMI of 20. And so there's all these little quirky things about this data set that you have to think about and account for when you're looking at those variables univariately. And that's not just for this data set. Any data set that you work with in the real world is going to have similar things happen. And there's going to be things that are completely different than the BRFSS. There's going to be things that are similar. But the important takeaway is to remember that if you do a good univariate analysis, really read through the codebook, you're going to catch a lot of those things, and those things are very important. So again, this week we're really going to start looking at bivariate or multivariate comparisons. Specifically, you're going to look a lot at how to compare two categorical variables. In a public health setting, you're going to work with a lot of categorical variables. We'll also look at how to compare two quantitative variables using what are called scatter plots, and you'll also start to learn the very basics of regression. So you want to keep in mind, as you move through the course, just like the other modules, you're going to need to do some coding, either in SAS or in R. But the most important thing is for you to think through what it is that you want to do with the variables. Do you need to transform them? Do you need to remove some values? What is it that you need to do to appropriately summarize them? And then if you need help with the code to do those things, of course, ask me, and I'm more than happy to help in any way that I can. So just keep up that hard work. And if there's anything that I can do to help, please just let me know.